everyone. This is Leslie Powers. I am here with my co-host and producer, Derek Bartolicelli, and we're really happy to bring to you another edition of Dissolving the Divide, where we bring on, some smart folks to talk about how we can bridge the gaps between us, because in this world we have many divides both within us and between us that are really unnecessary and holding us back from happiness and freedom. And so we want to help to find ways for us to connect and work together for good. And today we have an interesting discussion around the idea of forgiveness.
With Dr. the Radical Shadical Hargrove, or Chad Hargrove, if you will. And yeah, you are quite a human being. You're a journeyman, way shower, teacher, philosopher, standing on eternal principles, and you have an MD to your name as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Plus, you've been a conscious parent as well, for sure.
Trying to be every day.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what brings you to talk with us on a show called Dissolving the Divide.
Yeah. So as Derek alluded to, I do have my medical doctorate. 2013, I obtained that, and then after graduating medical school, I went into pediatrics residency, and that's the most notoriously, the residency is the most challenging part of any physician's career. It's when you're stepping from the role of being really just a student to having oversight and taking ownership of your patients and every moment, and going from like studying 100 hours a week to working 100 hours a week in a hospital and being involved in every single aspect of someone's care. So it's a tremendous responsibility. It's a very challenging time. My first week of pediatrics residency, my wife at the time divorced me, and she informed me that she would be keeping my daughter, who was 18 months old at the time, back home where we're from. And that was about a 5-hour drive, 300 miles away. And understandably, that was the, I thought I had dark nights of the soul prior to that, but that was the dark night. And I was crushed and obliterated as a human. And despite all the suffering and pain I was going through, I was able to show up for my patients and be there as they needed. But I was dying inside. The anger and the resentment and the hatred that I was carrying for her was dismantling my entire being. And if I wasn't at work, I was face down on the floor sobbing. With my dog, my only my dog of my sweet Willow, leaning against me, comforting me, and through. At that time, I had never engaged in any use of plant medicine. At that point, I was 29 years old, and through searching for an answer and a lot of study, I tried psilocybin mushrooms. And during an experience that I had, I like to say I was granted the gift of gnosis about forgiveness. I was told by something inside of me or outside of me or both that all I wanted to do was make my ex-wife hurt. I wanted her to hurt like I was. And so I was being verbally abusive on the phone, doing everything I could to inflict pain on her. And in the process, I was hurting myself, I was hurting her, and I was ultimately hurting my daughter. And when I was told that you can forgive and you'll set yourself free, you can forgive and recognize that people do shitty things because they're wounded, the only reason that I've done shitty things to other people in my life was because I was wounded and I didn't know how to process my wounds. I didn't know how to heal and recover from what I'd been through. So that started it all. It was it was shortly after that I stepped away from pediatrics residency and started going around and holding workshops on forgiveness and coming to that level of forgiveness and seeing it in real time and seeing how it set me free in real time really allowed for the natural law principles written on my heart to come forth, you know. And I'm still far from the statue, but it allowed the statue to resurrect or come forth from the stone that I had built around it. And so I began to speak about forgiveness and natural law and how balancing these two things and at least giving them more consideration than we already do can set our, can break our chains individually and as a collective. And so a few years later, As Within Emancipation Project was born, and I continued to travel. And aside from my day jobs and the way I support my life, I continued to travel and hold workshops on these types of things. And then I also offer like one-on-one consulting with people and kind of help add some perspective or add some insight to what they're going through. So long story long, that's kind of what it all is.
Yeah, no, that's inspiring. And it's something very relatable because almost everyone has had a heartache and a betrayal of some sort and had to grapple with really hard feelings of anger and resentment, sadness, and having been sometimes feeling like things are unforgivable.
Yeah.
And what were those insights that you received that helped you to go from that kind of hardened, unforgiving kind of mindset to a sense of forgiveness? And what does that forgiveness look like?
I in the beginning of that process, I knew inside, and I had this higher guidance that I can forgive the wounded person. I can forgive this person who is troubled. We're all troubled, and I can forgive them for that. And in fact, I think that's the essence of life, for us to be troubled, to make mistakes, and to transmute or transform those mistakes into something more. Mm-hmm. But I had to reconcile the fact that I could forgive them. I could forgive that person for being fucked up, but I don't have to forgive the action. The action is what it is, because forgiving that action would kind of mean like being okay with anyone ever doing that action ever again, or me perpetrating that action on someone else. And that's not acceptable, Mm-hmm. So instead of channeling my hatred and anger and resentment towards an individual, which mm-hmm. is really just a group of individuals in my human family, mm-hmm. I channeled it toward the action, and I began taking up my sword against ideas and ideologies. And I think I don't know. I'm not real studied in Bible scripture, but I know there's a verse that says we wrestle not with flesh and bone, but with principalities and ideas. And that resonates a lot with me, because my war isn't with a human. The worst human on the planet. I love them, and I'm on their side in that. Mm-hmm. I want them to heal from whatever's causing them to do the things they're doing. Mm-hmm. But I'll always stand in opposition to and wrestle with or bring my sword against mm-hmm. the immoral and the immoral transgressions they're committing. So that's what it looks like for me, is being able to develop compassion for, maintain compassion for the person by maintaining compassion for myself, and vice versa, and still being able to oppose an idea. I love you, but this is a transgression, and I'll tell you about it every time I observe it. And if it's going to harm someone in my awareness, I'll step in and intervene. I'll stop that from happening, not out of hatred for you, but for love of you and for love of the victim.
That's quite a bit of discipline, really, internally, as I think about it, to separate out and direct the anger towards the ideology and the behavior and not the person. Yeah.
And I feel like I always tell people that I'm not a master. I haven't mastered this. I have come to a good level of mastery of the grammar and the logic of this, mm-hmm. but I certainly haven't mastered the wisdom of of employing this every day and keeping the grace and mercy and discipline. So yes, it does require a lot of discipline, and every day I falter, and like, part of that is coming to terms with and being okay with being an imperfect human. I'll never be perfect, but I can know what perfection looks like. I can know what principle looks like, and just the discipline is when I step off the path, I remember that the destination is the path, and I just step back on it as quickly as I can.
Yeah, it seems like almost that it would be a daily commitment, in a sense.
As I call it, it's a daily operation, and people need to really understand that even if you're awake and whatever the hell, like, no, it's still a daily operation. Shadow work, you're gonna be doing that shit your whole fucking life. Awakening, that's your whole life type of thing. That inner gnosis, it's a gradual, step-by-step process, stepwise.
Every day, and I feel like the esoteric or the occulted aspects of this information and this knowledge is like, I can speak with people who have a much greater knowledge of occult philosophy and esoteric philosophy than I do about this stuff, and I can keep up word for word and have a good nuanced conversation. But my goal is to, I wouldn't say my goal, but in the work that I do, I try to put this, I try to make this practical, and how we can apply it in our everyday life. So when I'm doing workshops and things like that, I tell people, like, I'm not telling you that you have to forgive this person, or that you have to accept this behavior, or that you have to, engage moral principles that you already know. I'm telling you that if you do choose to do it, this is what's going to happen. This is what will happen. You will experience a higher level of freedom, and so that's kind of where I'm at with it, as far as like relaying a message or reminding people that I'm not here to dictate or preach or point fingers and smack a Bible to tell you what you have to do. I'm just telling you what are going to be the most likely consequences if you do choose to engage this process, and that you don't have to go be a monk or become a Christian, whatever, in some monastery somewhere. But all I'm inviting you to do is bring forgiveness and bring true morality a little further, a little more into your daily life and your daily practices. If you think about forgiveness once a year, think about it 4 times a year. If you think about it 4 times a year, think about it once a month. And doing that, at the end of my day, I try to look back and say, what am I holding on to? Who is my anger directed at? Where could forgiveness and where could moral accountability for my actions benefit me and benefit my family and the people I care about? So It's just about bringing it more and more into your awareness, because a lot of us go through life and we might not think about forgiveness for 10 years until someone we love who hurt us dies. And now we're like, well, what the fuck am I going to do with it? You know what I mean? Well, forgiveness isn't going to serve me now, but it will if you give it enough thought and reflect upon it enough.
Sure. I think, that people often are walking around feeling angry, maybe in ways they're not even clear about.
Right.
And holding on to resentments or bitternesses. And so, it sounds like there's like a practice that you're calling for self-reflection, to look at where you're holding on to that tension within yourself, and then bringing it to the table to transmute it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's really all, the conversation is really, it isn't really about, when you think deeply enough, it's not about forgiving other people. It's about forgiving yourself and accepting you for who you are, and accepting, like, the things that you've done that you can't change. The past is behind us. And when we develop that compassion for ourselves, we develop it for others. And it is, it's understandable to develop resentment and anger for other people. These things unfold in us. These are natural human adaptations to unnatural human circumstances. The things, we're not meant to inflict pain on each other and to do these things, but they are the way that we adapt because our society is scrambled up to oblivion, and we do hurt each other and we hurt ourselves. So that's pretty accurate.
We talked about with Corey Angelit last week in regards to the whole political divide and how there's so many programs running on programs that have people just pitted against each other, and it seems like people are so ensconced in their ego identification and attachments to whatever political party, and they got their bleeding heart dripping on the other person in a polarized fashion, unfortunately, more often than not these days. And for them to save face with their friends and family that they've kind of had a discord with and they're at odds with and this and that, what are some of these factors that are preventing people to forgive one another in that dynamic, if you will? I know it's kind of
I think a lot of it, I thought about this after you messaged me the other day and kind of touched on what you just said. And I think a lot of it has to do so much with self-forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for believing a lie, right? When we can't, when we hate ourselves or we resent ourselves because we believe something, we do it so deeply at the subconscious level that we won't even admit at the conscious level that what we believed was wrong. And the subconscious mind views admission of being wrong as dying. The subconscious mind views admission of a thought that we had or an idea that we believed in or cling to. That's the equivalent of death. So that's why we're so afraid of it. Because we cling to our ideas and we identify with our thoughts. So if, back in the day, I lost friends or temporarily lost friends over defending the actions of police and the military and the war machine. Back in the day, I was a pretty, not super staunch, but pretty staunch conservative Republican, years ago. And it took a long time for me to look back and say, well, that was wrong, and it's because we avoid admitting or accepting the fact that we were wrong, because admitting that an idea that we identify with, we think that idea is us. If we admit that was wrong, then we die. That's what the subconscious mind views it as. It is death. If we admit that something we think we are dies. Or it's not real. So I think that has a lot to do with it, being able to forgive ourselves and realize that we're all susceptible to believing lies. We're all susceptible to being deceived, and coming to terms with that and saying, I was wrong about a whole lot of shit. All these different things, and even now there are things that I still have to unravel and untangle that I am wrong about or was wrong about. And I've accepted that long since. That's okay. That's a part of my human imperfection and my free will to make mistakes and to believe lies. And the more you come to terms with that and bring that to an area of peace in your life and be like, okay, I've accepted the lies. I'm not going to donate my energy anymore to being pissed off at myself about it. Rather, I'm going to zoom out and look at it with clear eyes and through an objective lens and put my energy into unraveling it and figuring out where I was wrong. And when I do that, I develop compassion and understanding for where my neighbors and my loved ones are in regard to their political, social, economic views and stuff like that. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. It's, on the awakening journey, there's a lot of slaps in the face, kind of, where you start to see wrongdoings in the world. And like you were saying, you start to see the lies that, we believed ourselves and that we fell for. And we start to see how we've been lied to. And there can be a lot of anger and grief, in that process.
Yeah.
So it's and it's painful and difficult and can take a person time. So
Sure.
what is your thought about forgiveness, the process of forgiveness in relationship to time?
Yeah.
You know,
Um, it's forgiveness. For me, like forgiveness is not a cross section of our lives, but rather it's a progression in our lives.
It's not linear, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's while I think once you develop it and strengthen it enough within yourself, it can be used, as I call it, as a spear to break cycles within yourself. You throw the spear of forgiveness into a cycle and you break that cycle. But part of forgiveness is developing mercy on ourselves as we go through the growing pains. And I think like Jacob's ladder and the Masonic symbolism, it should really have been twisted into a spiral staircase, rather than a ladder, because it's not just one and done. We're not just like, okay, I forgive this. Even, you go up to parts of yourself, you climb the ladder and get to parts of yourself that you say, okay, I've forgiven that. Well, 6 months down the road, when you get triggered again, or a year down the road, when you come into a new relationship or you develop another attitude towards something, you're going to realize that maybe you didn't address all of that needed healed and needed processed. That's kind of how I look at it. It's like, that's why I try to stick with and try to reiterate that the first and foremost, the practice needs to be involved with yourself, because as you, that's why I've named the charity As Within. You know what I mean? As you develop that compassion and mercy on yourself, and it may take weeks, months, years, decades, and I'll still be unraveling shit on my deathbed, and that's okay. But as I do that, the more I do that, the more mercy I have for my neighbor, and the more mercy I have for my loved ones when they're reactive and they're triggered and they're doing things that don't represent their true self.
Right. So by developing the compassion for yourself, it allows you to be compassionate to others as well. And so the forgiveness is it going in both directions.
And naturally, and that's something that we all understand. You could say that to anybody and they'll be like, yeah, that is true. But then the next morning they're on the rat wheel again. They're on the hamster wheel again, and they've forgotten it, or so it's just all about gradually or not so gradually, depending on your situation, bringing that back to the surface and seeing that's the case by law. It's not the case by opinion or belief. That's the case by correspondence, and how things operate. So, yeah.
As above, so below, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And similar to the idea of acceptance, when we talk about the stages of grief as well, that acceptance, you kind of think of it as an end goal, but you don't really stay at the end goal. You end up, spiraling back around through all sorts of emotions.
Yeah.
And revisiting it. And forgiveness and acceptance perhaps are similar in their vibration.
Yeah. And and they are very similar, and I try to, and don't, not always successfully, but to tease apart that, acceptance of the person is not acceptance of the action. That person, we're all still under mind control, whether it's just 1% or 99%. And it does take time, and that mercy grows for yourself and grows for your neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how you put it, healing in real time. I really like how you word that, because it's so true. And there's like these alleviating feelings that you feel within your heart, at least for me. I don't know about y'all, but and that's why I put up the sigil on the top right of Mayat's Living Light as a Feather, word to Brandon Spencer. We spoke, some volumes on that. And forgiveness is key on this. It really is about dissolving all your resentment, remorse, and these negative feelings that are just not resolved within oneself first and foremost. And that's why we have all these projections on the reality field and with other people, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely a practice, and I call I also refer to the acceptance of our imperfection. I call it, perfectly imperfect. We're supposed to be imperfect. We're not God. We're not creator, and we're not that infallible cosmic all. And so, not only am I practicing forgiveness now in the spiritual and emotional and mental hygiene of trying to keep myself clean, but also I call it a preemptive strike. I know that I'm going to fuck up tomorrow, next week, the next day, whatever. And I'm okay with that. I'm going to do my best to be the observer of that. And I'm going to do my best to not waste 1 minute or 1 ounce of hatred and resentment towards myself, but I'm going to look at it like I'm looking through a microscope of this was the situation. What does it mean? How can I improve it? And when we're caught in the cycle of self-loathing and lack of respect for ourselves, it's nearly impossible to really look at it objectively. Our vision is blurred by the resentment and blurred by the hatred. So that's always an aspiration of mine, is to look at it clearly and not continue to throw skeletons in my closet or continue to build on it.
Yeah. So what would you say is the difference in the quality of our life or our experience from holding on to resentment and not forgiving versus choosing to forgive and doing that clearing work within? How does that change the quality of our life?
Well, when we're choosing not to forgive, particularly when it's forgive someone else, but also with ourselves, we're poisoning our psychic field. We are poisoning our auric field and holding it in low vibration. So we're poisoning it with the internal desire or need or necessity to make that person to hurt more. And in doing that, we're not hurting them. We're only hurting ourselves. We could be hurting them. That vibrational, energetic tether we have to that person, particularly in really close relationships, that could be hurting them for sure. But it's most definitely hurting us, and it's certainly not helping them. So I forget your original question.
Yeah, the difference, the quality of life. Like you're saying, when
Yeah.
you are in a place of unforgiveness, there's this heavy, low kind of vibrational pull on us.
Right. Yeah, it's like an anchor. It's like an anchor for your boat. It's holding you down. Even if the tide is rising, your boat is fighting against the tide. Fighting against the law of rhythm, so it definitely dulls and removes joy and freedom from our quality of experience. And as Derek mentioned earlier about this alleviation of pressure, and I call that hearing the chains break. When I got that message of forgiveness, I heard the chains. I heard the metal snap in my mind, and I heard the metal snap off of my heart, but those chains shattered, and I was able to insert forgiveness into a situation that seemed desperate, and a situation that seemed like there was no hope. So our quality of experience, our mental and our emotional freedom is, and everybody knows, everyone knows this. This isn't a secret, you know what I mean? Or like, but it's just that we're so distracted with all the myriad things that bombard us and keep our energy focused away from this internal work, that our chains break when we forgive, particularly when we forgive ourselves, and then we'll continue to hear chains break as we forgive others. And that doesn't mean like, let's say I had a partner that, punched me in the face 10 times every time I got home from work at the end of the day. Forgiving that person doesn't mean continuing to come home every day and getting punched in the face. I'm at least going to throw a hand up and catch the fist, right? I'm still going to stand in opposition to that action. I'm going to stop the action. You're not going to hurt me anymore, but I'm also not going to hate you. I'm not going to give away my creative power. My creative power lies in being here right now and finding a solution for it. My solution is either getting the fuck out of that situation or stopping an attack when it's coming to me. I don't have to hate you to do that. And in fact, I love you to do that, to stop you from committing transgressions, and to stop myself from having transgressions committed against me.
And it's about that love for self first to, embody that sacred masculine principle of, self protection, self defense, which is kind of why. So the background is, you got the blue and the right, which is, obviously stands for the divisional politrix, but also the two hemispheres of the brain, feminine, masculine, all that stuff.
Right.
And, obviously we're conditioned to have these things imbalanced within us. And to understand that in and of itself, and when we extract ourselves from those programmings or deprogram from it in this and that, we do. And well, I guess not everyone, because not everyone's practicing true fucking compassion who's on an awakened level state, because you see a lot of people talking shit on the internet like it was the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
So anyways, but like getting back into that heart center and like having compassion for others that we disagree with, because whatever divide and conquer dialectics going on, we can still understand that we're still standing on eternal principles that are immutable.
Yes.
And we're just trying to like give them a lift up to where we're standing on, and where we're not standing on, it's not the moral fucking high ground or any of that bullshit. It's just like where humanity is supposed to be. That is the fertile common ground soil that we should all be resting upon.
Exactly. And when we refuse to do that, when we refuse to strengthen our compassion and strengthen our foundation of values and principles, we are doing exactly what they want us to do.
Yeah.
We are doing precisely what the system was designed to do. So not only is forgiveness a way to freedom, and a way to unenslaving ourselves to the ego or to the will of others, it's an act of sacred rebellion. When I forgive myself and I forgive my neighbor, I'm rebelling against the system that wants me to hate my neighbor and to hate myself. So I'm standing up and saying, fuck you. I'm not going to do it anymore. You know what I mean? I'm gonna promote unity over division, and I'm not going to hate them. I'm going to hate the lies you fucking told them. I'm going to hate the deception that we've been fed this whole time. And so, I see it as an act of, ultimate rebellion to develop our compassion and mercy for our neighbor. Because as long as we're looking side to side and not looking up at the, for the problems of the world, we're going to continue this cycle.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chad. I think it's key, in this time when it's so easy to get offended by something someone says, or to make an assumption. There's so many assumptions going around, that lead to these sort of standoffs or avoidances. A lot of times it's people will just avoid and hold on to like a opinion about someone. But what I find is, that when you are in that place of anger and rigidity, like you were saying, where I like what you said, the anchor on the rhythm of our emotion, right? Because our emotions are meant to be fluid, to flow. And when we're hardened and rigid in like anger or resentment or unforgiveness, then we're kind of like the ice cube, that's not flowing.
Exactly.
And,
frozen consciousness.
And when you can forgive, or at least you soften from a place of compassion and curiosity, then that opens the dialogue with that other person. And my experience is a lot of the times when I open with curiosity, I realized maybe I was wrong, that I was making an assumption that wasn't all entirely accurate, or I learned I can feel the humanness of that person and forgive, and that dialogue allows new transformation and connection and unity possibilities.
Yeah, I love the word that you use, curiosity. It sparked like a thought in me that I hadn't really considered before. That like curiosity is in the context or on the presumption that I don't know it all. I'm looking to learn. I'm looking objectively. I don't have it all figured out and everything under control. Let me see what it's about. And that's a pinnacle like mindset to have when looking at forgiveness. Hey, we can. I don't know if you were able to pause the video, but I've been getting my cacao and my water and everything in me. I definitely got a rock.
Go. Yeah. Go ahead.
Cool. Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
All right, I'm
Yeah.
back. I just took an ice bath about 2 hours before we started.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
No way.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was brutal. I can usually I've gone in there for up to 7.5 minutes, and today it was only about a minute and a half. For some reason, I was shivering. I don't usually ever do that when I'm in there.
That's really good. It's a
Wow.
good practice. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing it mostly for like mental discipline. Getting back into a disciplined
Fuck yeah,
mind
dude.
state.
Wow.
So yeah, it's I've fallen off a little bit, but I try to shoot for at least like 15, 20 minutes a week.
That's good. Yeah.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. All right. So, kind of getting back into the groove, I really liked your point, Chad, about part of this experience of forgiveness. Or look at that! Oh my god!
He's my
Okay,
sweet
part
boy.
of,
Happy Saturday, by the way.
part of
Yeah.
I'm totally distracted by the cat.
Yeah, me
course,
too.
yeah.
He's good at that.
Oh. So forgiveness helps. If we can forgive each other, then we can come together in dialogue, right? And we can then work together against the sort of evil forces in the world, right? So this is why it's important not to allow ourselves to fall for these dialectics
Right.
that are splitting us, getting us mad at each other for saying this or that, right?
Exactly. And I can be pissed off at what you said. I'm allowed. I can be that. But if I hate you because of it, then I can't talk to you about it. I can't have a dialogue with you about it without you being defensive. I can. And if I can bring the vibration of acceptance of you while rejection of your idea, if I can bring that vibration into a conversation, then I can have the conversation. But if I'm so overtaken by being pissed off at you because you believe this or believe that, then the conversation's over before it started. And so the forgiveness is key to developing that vibration of safety to have a fucking conversation. We're so scared to have a conversation that we'll shut down and we're not going to talk about it. We will never unify. We will never be able to unify if we're scared to have conversations. And if it's too uncomfortable for us, and it usually gets uncomfortable for us because the anger that we have towards the idea someone's putting forth, the anger that we have towards that translates or crosses over to anger towards them, and so we can't have the discussions that we need to have.
Because people are drunk off of like haterade and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Not me, but
Exactly.
what's up with that word hate? It's such a 4-letter word, right?
Right.
But that's part of the alchemical process, which is why I got the top right. Triangle, square.
You see that bad boy? Interesting that you did that, right? That's
what I thought it was.
Yeah, that's an organite pendant with like shungite and quartz and copper in it. It's my friend makes these. They're fantastic.
Very cool.
So this whole idea of forgiveness, I'm running it through my mind. It is an alchemical process because you are forgiving yourself of these false identities that you attach to or grew into, and even the false doctrines, prophets, and negative knowledge that we've just been subjected to, and kind of like, okay, television, politics, they tell us this, okay, kind of go with it. Sometimes we don't have that critical thinking because it wasn't educated in us,
right,
unfortunately. But any words on the whole alchemical process of and how it really alleviates one? It is a healing process. It's nothing to be fearful of, and it's something that people should be looking forward to because it's so empowering, and you become such a better person in the end.
I did a workshop. You can see it on my YouTube page called "The Alchemy of Forgiveness." And like when I go into forgiveness, I talk about, my experience, how I came to understand how powerful it was. Then I go into the apophysis of forgiveness. So what forgiveness is not. And then under my list of things to talk about with what forgiveness is, one of the first 2 or 3 things listed is always alchemy. And it's, our shitty experiences and the things that hurt us and the lies that we believe are lead and they weigh us down. And then we engage the process of forgiving ourselves for accepting those things, taking away any blame that we have on ourselves for, even if there is, even if we were partly responsible, not hating ourselves because of our responsibility in the experience, and transmuting it into wisdom, turning it into gold, and that's the alchemical process. Let me take all the shitty things I've been through, the things that if I haven't processed them affect who I am every single day, and look at them and examine them and apply forgiveness. And then when I apply forgiveness, I break the cycle of fear. I break the cycle of resentment towards myself, hatred towards the person, all that. And I can zoom out and I can look at it for what it is. And I can say, okay, this shitty experience is not a monster anymore. Instead, it's a teacher. So what gifts do you bring? And it is something to look forward to. It's exciting to be able to say, my experiences are a part of me, but I am not my experiences. And I'm so much more than that. Now, what can I do with them? How can I work with that shadow material or that lead and transmute it into something higher, and invoke the philosopher's stone?
Yeah, the gift, right? The gift of the transmutation. And it's also implies that there's a loss, that you miss something very rich potentially by staying stuck or rigid in anger without forgiveness.
Yeah. And here's your chance. You didn't lose anything. You're not dead yet. You know what I mean? You're not, you're not, your consciousness hasn't been shut off. Your eternal being, the part of yourself that can't die, hasn't been, the switch hasn't been flipped. So just because it took you a little while, that's all good. Look, what are you going to do about it now?
It's never too late. Although I would say that there is, the longer you wait, the more you're missing. And I think of the example you gave that sort of awakened you to this forgiveness with a former spouse, the mother of your child, and like I'm imagining, tell me the truth about this. Like when you went to that forgiveness, what did that open up? What kind of gifts did you receive from that act of forgiveness?
Every single relationship that meant something to me in my entire life healed, and it strengthened. Everything that meant anything to me became stronger and became more solid. And I didn't, and I began one by one dropping the resentments I was hanging on to from childhood. And I began loving my mother with a whole heart, and in the following 12 months, I was able to engage in plant medicine with my mother, who was an alcoholic and had been dying of cirrhosis for 10 years. I was able to engage in these plant medicines with her and heal so much. And then she died from a car accident, 12 months later. But it was that 12 months of forgiveness and understanding and engagement and conversation and compassion and releasing the chains that held us both back from being who we wanted to be for each other, that I was prepared. I wasn't destroyed when she died. I was, and so the gifts I got from that were that I stopped them first and foremost. Most importantly, I stopped harming my daughter because I wanted to hurt her mother.
Yes,
that was the number one gift. Because I was, she was only 2 years old at the time, but she was listening to her mother cry and try to defend her actions from me attacking her on the phone on the other line. She had to live through that. And that's never going to help my daughter. And that's never going to help me. It's never going to help her. Additionally, I stopped harming my ex-wife. No matter how bad she hurt me, I stopped. I let go. I never again from that point forward did I feel the need to hurt her anymore. I didn't need her to feel the pain that I felt because she had already felt pain. She's already suffered, and I looked at my feet, and then I looked around me and I saw everybody else's feet, and that self-inflicted suffering and inability to heal was the common ground we were all standing on. And I didn't have to try to hurt her anymore. And so I stopped hurting myself, and I stopped hurting my daughter and my ex and my mother and my father and my sister and then my neighbors, all that. So everything that I really valued, but maybe didn't know I valued until that time, became stronger in my life and my relationships. And I experienced what true unity meant within myself. And I saw what true unity was outside of myself.
Yeah. Really, I'm glad you brought that up because, I could say from my own life, the experience of my children's dad holding on to bitterness and holding on to this for a long, long time, right? And having a hard time with forgiveness and seeing the hurt that caused our children and me, and in my knowing how it could have been very different,
Right.
and the quality of experiences that we could have had, and the unity and the love that my children, the decreased tension they would have felt, and the
Yeah.
confusion they would not have had, right? It could have been very different. So it's very
Right.
sad to miss the opportunity to forgive.
Sure. That's true. And even the short period of time, whether it's 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years, probably a year and a half, that I was going through that and creating more confusion and conflict within my separated family unit, you know, that's that's also, it is sad. And then it's also, it's part of the alchemical process is seeing that as the sad thing that it is, and the disappointing thing that it is. We thought it was going to be different, but it wasn't. But now look at all the gold I have to hand to my children, and look at all the lead I turned into gold. And now I can share it with my children and say, do you remember this? Or, or maybe even not bring it up, but if they bring it up, say, yeah, that was a time in our life that was difficult. And I know that, being able to forgive is so important. And sometimes people don't get along like they thought they would. And even though it hurt really bad, it would have hurt you a lot worse for a lot longer if I would have stayed in that situation and continued to demonstrate to you what toxicity looks like day to day,
Right.
So that from the sad, there is also a gift.
Yeah. And on my side, I have a choice. I have a choice to hold bitterness and be mad and not forgive him for not forgiving me,
Right.
or I can demonstrate, do this process of forgiveness of him, of myself, right? For how I took action that created, set in motion this like shit show or whatever that we went through. And so anyone in any part of this can make an impact, I guess. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you understand and strive to embody the principles of morality, principle of forgiveness, when you strive to do that, nothing remains unchanged. Nothing. And I had a whole lot of legal trouble and legal strife back in 2019. My house was raided. I spent 4 months in the county jail here in this my town of Indiana. And during that time, I made the best of it. I held workshops in the jail. One interesting thing that provided me a lot of comfort was I was in the holding cell waiting to go up the general population the first few days I was arrested. And after about 24 hours, I finally got the chance to sit on a bench, instead of the floor, because a spot got freed up. And I laid down there and I had my eyes closed. And when I opened my eyes, in Dearborn County drunk tank, there on the wall, right in front of my eyes, was the word forgive scratched into the paint. And it provided me a lot of comfort. But that was a little aside. During that, I had a call, like a visitation Zoom meeting type call with a friend of mine who said, I tried to, I went to my stepfather and I tried to employ your principles of forgiveness, and, it ended up biting me in the ass. It ended up, hurting worse than it did. And I said, well, then it wasn't true forgiveness. If you go into the forgiveness saying, I'm only going to be free from this if this person accepts it the way that I want them to, or the way that I think they will, then it's conditional love. It's conditional love for that person, and it hurts more than it helps.
And it creates a negative feedback loop in a sense. And it can kind of foster like this resentment of
more resentment.
I tried to forgive this person, they didn't forgive me, so I'm gonna resent him more almost sometimes.
It makes it worse. It makes the resentment worse. And this is a great tie-in, or a great segue into the notion that I know a good handful of people in the freedom and natural law community view forgiveness as, where forgiveness is only possible if the other person openly repents and openly changes their ways. And I don't believe this is not true. I know that it's not true. I can forgive someone regardless of what they do, and not because I'm like I read it in a book, but because I've done it. An older kid in my neighborhood molested me when I was 6 years old, and I have no idea where this person is. I have no idea what their life's like now. I don't know if they're dead or alive. But if you think about that same type of situation, if someone, assaults you and then they die 10 minutes later, well, all of a sudden you're not allowed to forgive them. You're not allowed to heal from that experience because they died, or because they didn't express to you, they didn't meet your criteria for giving them the forgiveness. So it has that's something important to remember. Now reconciliation and true repentance, observing true repentance in someone who has transgressed, or true rectification or straightening out of a situation, does require the person to say, hey, I fucked up. This was wrong. I'm going to do everything in my power not to do that again. But for me to forgive only requires one party, and it only requires one will, and it requires my highest will to forgive that person, and to say, I'm done giving you my creative power. I'm done giving you my ability to create solutions, and to oppose the action or the idea, and I'm going to keep it for myself and stop squandering it on hating you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that point while I was on here.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's more of a spiritual and energetic experience, and not necessarily saying that you're going to have the same agreements with that person ongoing. You choose to end your business relationship or whatever relationship, and still forgive them in a spiritual, emotional way.
Yeah, I'm not perfect, and I can forgive you and still accept that you're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect until, as long as you live, you won't be perfection, and you can still fuck up. And if the fuck up causes harm to someone else, I'll still oppose it, but I'm not going to oppose you or hate you. And it is exactly as you said. It's an ability to. It is a spiritual process that I can offer, and it's different. It's not quite the same. I can let go of something, and I can accept something, or I can look away and spiritually bypass something. But even in the very word, when you utter the word forgive or forgiveness, for me, there's a ground shaking, earth shaking profundity to it. It's a profound notion, and that's because of the tremendous healing power in not looking away, not saying, fuck it, I'll let it go, because the tether's still there, the anchor is still tied to the boat if you just look away or let it go. But when I forgive, I cut it, I sever the emotional reactivity associated with that. So it is different. I would differentiate all those things from true forgiveness.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring a trinity of synthesis in a sense real quick, because on one side we have forgiveness, on the other side we have apology, and at the center core, that's where we can rectify things between people, I think. And so what is apology? Apo logos, to take back the word. Like, we're having an argument and people want to use logical fallacies and ad hominem attacks, whatever, heated of the moment type of stuff, and looking back and like, oh man, I feel bad about that. And yeah, there is that energetic vibration that Leslie was doing. And I know for me, like, just feeling it within my activated heart, that forgiving someone, forgiving myself, and apologizing from that level of sincerity, it has that kind of soul spark energy.
Yes, and you said it, that sincerity, and like that all helps the process. I'm not saying like forgive people and don't accept their apology, or forgive people regardless, but it's like forgiveness is for you. Apology is for the both of you. A rectification or reconciliation of a wrongdoing is for both of you to develop closer understanding. So it's even better. It's even more liberating when two people can become free instead of one.
Yeah.
But you're not responsible for them. And so the least you can do is make yourself free and contribute to that, to the psychic field or the collective vibration by freeing yourself. We only have responsibility and control over ourselves to a degree. So doing, the forgiveness part is on us and for us. And if it helps them, fantastic. But that's not the goal. The goal is to free ourselves and liberate ourselves, that we may be the lighthouse in our community, in our family, and the better version of ourselves. And if that person says, thank you for your forgiveness, or before you even forgive them, say, man, I fucked up, that was wrong, and I will commit myself, dedicate myself, devote myself to not doing that again and growing into a better person. That just
Oh yeah.
makes it, that's just even icing on the cake. That's even better.
Right.
Life examples real quick. I mean, how many times have you been into an argument, even in like high school and this and that, and like you're like, oh man, dude, like, and then you work it out with whoever, and you become like best friends almost. You there's
Yeah.
like compelling like polarity.
Right.
Like,
A true bond or is formed, or a bond that was already there, a soul bond, or a real energetic spiritual bond was strengthened and was realized, not just like, like in playing in the background. The relationship was like, cool. I feel closer to you, but it was realized, brought forth and manifested into something strong, and a demonstration of what real unity is. When
Right.
both of you are like, hey, I was wrong here, I was wrong here.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we do now?
The repair of a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
which is a bonding experience. It creates attachment, between people to go
Yeah.
through breaks and severing of trust, even, and then, apology and forgiveness and repair. And it's like beautiful when they can come together, right?
Yes.
Like the
Yes.
both sides. And, but as you were saying, like, let go of expectation.
Right.
When you're
Right.
thinking of true forgiveness, it's not based on them having to do something. It's not
Yeah.
conditional. There's an
Yeah.
unconditional aspect to this without expectation.
Right. And if they don't do that thing, if they don't see the error in their ways and undergo their own individual internal process of true repentance and correcting their ways, then the relationship doesn't have to continue. But neither does my hatred or my resentment. That's why I forgive. And then when there is true repentance and it's expressed, I was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. I was wrong when I said this. That wasn't the real me. I was wrong when humility and curiosity, like you said, what caused that? All those things are living and real time examples of true unity, and that fractals out into our other relationships, and the alchemical process of turning that negative into a positive carries over to all our relationships.
What do you think about the idea, of when we're dealing here with like psychopaths,
Sure.
energetic vampires? And I'm reminded of a quote that Michael Desarian made of like, where he says, you don't send love. I think he would probably say, don't forgive, but I remember in the
Sure.
quote, it says, don't send love, because, and energetically, there, maybe that is like creating a weakness or something. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the exceedingly small portion of humanity are true psychopaths.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is secondary psychopathy, or like learned or conditioned or programmed psychopathy. And I just don't think, I don't believe that hatred of the individual promotes healing. Whether the person is beyond repair or not, me hating them isn't going to help them. Now, me hating their idea, a psychopath that says it's okay to, kill people every couple of weeks for me to feel good about myself. Well, I'll tell them all day, I'll tell them all day and express to them all day how wrong that is, and how it's not the way, it's not appropriate, it's not acceptable. But I can do that without hatred of them. I can do that with hatred of the idea, or the action of killing people. You know, so yeah, that's my only real take on it, is that hating an individual, and I don't necessarily have to send them love. but I don't have to send them hate either. You know,
Yeah.
I can reserve my energy for something more constructive, because if the percentage of people who are not psychopaths can undergo a process of healing and come to a place of understanding the same way that I did and you all have, well, then we're okay. You know what I mean? If there's 1 out of 1 million people who wants to do shitty things to others, well, then if we're all in a healed state and all our creative power is free to find solutions, we can, just like someone who has a Ebola virus, or has some sort of someone who's sick and has the chance to harm another person, we can remove them from society without trying to hurt them further.
Yeah.
That's the whole like premise of our justice system. Our justice system is about punishment, when nature will take care of the punishment. We just need to invoke self-defense and protect our communities and our society from someone who can harm them, whether it's something they can infect people with, or whether it's a serial rapist. It's not our job to hurt them any more than they're already hurt, because they're already fucked, doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But it is our job to invoke self-defense and protect ourselves, our families, our communities, and quarantine them until they are well. And if they don't ever become well, they'll stay in quarantine.
Right. And we can set those boundaries and take the proper action of protection and self-defense without hatred.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say that that's really an important point, because I think one of the imbalances that we experience in humanity, both in the individual level and as a kind of these larger group kind of swinging of hatred and hostility that we see, is it's indicating our own wound. It's indicating our own unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So
Right.
it's telling us about us, that we are not in a synthesized place within ourselves. We haven't processed and, worked through our emotions. So then it's like we have work to do to deal with our hatred, so that we can come to the table with a balanced brain and
Exactly.
full,
Exactly.
holistic thinking.
And that statement says it all. Says it all about the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat our planet, the way we treat our neighbors and our family and loved ones, is the balance. The hatred and the unwillingness, not inability, because the ability is there in all of us, but the unwillingness to forgive, leaving the hatred intact, and leaving the resentment and the desire for punishment intact, is how we remain in the system, in the condition of slavery. And when we don't have that, it's like putting Windex on your third eye. It cleans the lens. Forgiveness cleans the lens, and it allows us to say, okay, yeah, I was really pissed off about that. I really hated that person. I still don't like the idea, and I'm still, now I want to figure out what I'm going to do to stop the idea from spreading and to stop the action from continuing.
Yeah.
And you have you have so much more creative power and ability to reason and apply logic to a situation, if you're not caught up in the emotional trigger and the hatred of the individual.
Yes. We're going to have our superpowers more activated.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, real quick, I gotta ask you something, because that really stems into something beautiful. Because, yeah, like, why are we punishing people when, at the same time, like, we can hold up the mirror and be like, you're hurting yourself. Do you not understand that? And you're,
Right.
Projectile vomiting, whatever onto other people, unfortunately. And do we all have to suffer because of that? Kind of like,
Right.
can we all be friends? But
Right.
here's the thing. And because, listening to one of your chats with the good old the NFL, the true
Yeah.
NFL, Natural Freedom League, you
Yep.
mentioned something as, you guys talked about how suffering is the teacher. And I feel that for sure. And it's such a catalyst for people to awaken and snap the fuck out of it, whatever the
Right.
hell. Yet, what about those people that do not want to learn, or are numb to the pain, used to it, or nihilistically, identify with that? They have that victimization card attachment to it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And, part of that forgiveness process allows me to remember that their thoughts, emotions, and actions are not my property, and that I only have a degree of control or responsibility of my thoughts, emotions, and actions, and that if they don't want to, or they're nihilistic, or they are refuse to, there's not much I can do about that except, love them through their wounding, love them through their hurt. And if they're doing immoral things because of it, if they're harming my neighbor or harming me, then do what's within my rights to stop that, and say, it's your own karma, it's your own, you will reap what you sow by refusing to do that. And I'm not the punisher. You know what I mean? I will stop. If you refusing to do that is causing you to, hurt my children or hurt my neighbor or whatever, I will definitely stop that action, always. But unfortunately, you are the tender of your own garden. You know what I mean? You have to reap what you sow, and knowing that natural law and the consequence will be the ultimate teacher for them. The least I can do is try to inform them, try to educate them, speak with them, do what's within my rights, and stop any harm that they want to cause, while allowing life to teach them and nature to teach them. And they're, hopefully in this lifetime they'll suffer enough to snap out of it. But I have to accept the fact that they may not, and it's not my job or responsibility or right to necessarily, interfere with their own cycle of cause and effect,
Yeah.
unless it's directly causing harm or transgression against myself or someone else.
That's so great. Real quick, Leslie, I want to hear what you have to say, but I just want to make people understand real quick that what you're talking about, Chad, it's like, like, oh, forgiveness and this, that. It's so easily, applicable to like, oh, the new age woo-woo passive bullshit.
Yeah, right.
So, and that's not what you're talking about, because we're resting
No
on,
way.
firm principles, the pillars of enlightenment, masculine, feminine, take no shit, but do no harm.
Right.
Leslie,
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with this passivity. I condemn, the world religions and new age deception as well. There are like most religions, there are some valuable truths in new age, but it's largely another mind prison, and you can't just meditate the world out of slavery. It's important, but it's not how it's done. And in no way does this mean let someone harm you or let someone harm your neighbor. But I can stop harm without hating the person. I can stop that. And in fact, I can more effectively stop harm when I'm not caught in an emotional spiral of negativity and resentment and hatred and loathing for myself and for others. I can do it out of love. If I take a bullet to prevent school children from being shot, I can do it much better, much more effectively from a place of love and compassion than from a place of hatred and fear.
Yeah.
That only clouds my decision making and blurs my judgment.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. And it may have someone in a state of like revenge instead of the protection mode.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Protection's first and foremost, self-defense. Defend yourself, your neighbor, and those you care about. And then revenge will happen on its own. But my responsibility is to invoke self-defense and to protect and to be a guardian, and the suffering will come to that. But they will reap what they sow, regardless of what I had to say about it. So I'm not going to give all my power away to trying to punish.
Yeah, it's almost like forgiveness is step one.
Yeah, the foundation. The foundation, and these natural law principles are nothing new. It's not something that everyone doesn't know. Don't hurt people. Don't take shit that doesn't belong to you. It's like, as Larkin Rose would call it, like I think he calls it like kindergarten morality or whatever. It's all there. We already know that. But the more resentment and hatred we have towards ourselves, the less able it is to come forth within us. And it's simple to see. You don't need a fucking white lab coat and some peer-reviewed literature to know that if I don't hate myself, I'm less likely to hurt someone else. If I don't hate myself, I'm less likely to perpetuate and participate in systems of aggression.
Right.
And if I don't hold resentment and hatred towards myself, I'm much more likely to align with natural law. I'm much less likely to perpetuate transgressions. So it's simple, and everyone knows this, And so, yeah, I'm just trying to just remind people of that.
Yeah, I think that you could probably prove that by looking at crime records and the stories of the people who committed them. And
Yeah,
yeah, you'd probably see those patterns.
no doubt.
I was thinking about, I would say a person who identifies with their wound, and is unwilling to go to that next step of forgiveness. So when you identify with your wound, you're essentially identifying as a victim. And
Yeah.
so you're staying in this polarity where there is a victim and a perpetrator. And by staying in that place of being victim, you're disempowering yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you as in that mindset and in that heart set, you're nothing more than the effect. You're simply the effect of what you've been through.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you forgive and you step outside that, you become the cause of your experience.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
The locus of control is really tied in here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, you did a
Great.
great presentation on that, Leslie, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Nice.
connects.
Yeah.
Very, very profound, actually. So much it connects to, actually, that I hadn't really thought of before we were talking.
Yeah, I unfold. Anytime I give it true consideration and true introspection, on the value of forgiveness, the more I learn. And I've conceded that that's probably going to be the case forever. The more I think about it and the more I work to apply it, the more value I'll take from it. And I think that's the case for anybody. And you again, it's not. No one has to believe my words. You know what I mean? Just give it a go. Just work to consider forgiveness more. And a lot of that, like, it was when I applied that forgiveness in my life that those natural law principles unfolded within me, bloomed like a lotus, within me. And I remembered, and I didn't quite have the grammar for it. I came across plenty of teachers and mentors that helped me with the grammar and understanding. Oh, okay. That's what I was thinking about. Like, as a child, I vividly remember pondering specific natural law principles without the vocabulary, but pondering specific principles, particularly the principle of mentalism. And it was when I was able to forgive myself, I fucking snapped out of it. I snapped out of the trance I was in, and it's incredible. It's just, we all have that ability and capacity. And then that self-forgiveness is so important because we all have that capacity. And so once we realize that, it's really easy to get very pissed off at ourselves when we don't embody it every day.
Sure.
You're gonna walk off the path. You're gonna step
I love
off
that,
the
man.
path.
I can totally relate. And yeah, it's for me like natural law, the science of life. And I also like to call it the codes of consciousness. And those things can just be activated within oneself and just like remembering these sacred principles that are just embedded within our DNA to begin with. You mentioned that in another, you know what I mean? So
right,
I feel you, man. Fuck,
it never went anywhere. No matter how far we walked off the path, it was
we got
always
disconnected
there.
from birth and all that, but
Yeah,
conditioning
exactly.
since then.
Yep.
So, Chad, do you have like I don't want to say a method, but kind of like a process that you go through in your own head, a line of questions that you ask yourself, or a way that you remind yourself to do this forgiveness process?
That's. I would say that that real profound experience of gnosis, almost pretty much a mystical experience. It has really worked its way into not my second nature, but being my first nature, my state of mind, my state of heart, my state of being. And but I do often, with the people I work with one-on-one, I do often have to come up with examples or practices or things to help strengthen the process. And a lot of times when people are struggling with self-forgiveness, which is the main thing and most of us struggle with, I tell them to think of a scenario that's either happened or just make one up in their head about the person they care about and they treasure the most on the whole planet coming to them and saying, I'm a fuck up, I'm worth nothing, I'm no good, I went to buy a gumball and put 3 quarters in the machine instead of 2, or whatever, some sort of silly scenario, or some sort of time when someone you love comes to you in a time of need and says, I really hate myself. What would you say to them? And you must remember that you're worthy of the same advice. You're worthy of the same forgiveness. You know, you're not going to hate them because they made this silly mistake, or even if it was a big mistake. You're not going to hate them. You're going to say, well, you know what? Forgive yourself and just learn from the experience, you know? And that's really that simple advice that we all have to take for ourselves. And this whole forgiveness process can remind us that we're worthy of that same advice and we're worthy of that same compassion. So I do that a lot. And then when it comes to people like communicating with one another and trying to forgive one another, I always have people reflect back on a time where they hurt somebody else, or reflect back on a time where they did something or said something to someone they cared about, and then afterwards we're like, fuck, that wasn't me, that wasn't the real me. And realize that the same thing that made you act like an asshole is the same thing that's making them act like an asshole. Okay, so be gentle on yourself and be gentle on them, because we're all assholes from time to time, and it's because of the same thing: fear, deception, woundedness.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, getting caught up in the moment, whatever. And yeah, I really appreciate it and can relate also what I want to mention of just going back to being a kid and like being in tune with that stuff, and like realizing like, oh, like I've actually felt some kind of hurt upon myself if I, when I caused harm to someone, that kind of thing. And just like, being able to look at again, respectare, that's the true definition of respect. And like,
Right.
being able to save face, and hopefully in the end, like, we're refining our consciousness so we don't lose face in the future towards anyone we're interacting with in this interface reality, right, in the collective consciousness. And
to look again, just look again, you know what I mean? Look at yourself again. And like I always say, like, in the meantime, until you sort it out, it's all okay. There's a lyric from a band that I listen to, and it says, in the end, it's all okay, and if it's not okay, it's not the end. So it's just like take a minute, just be graceful with yourself, have some fucking mercy. If you can't do it for yourself, just put yourself in the shoes of someone you really care about, and give yourself the same mercy you'd give them. And it's simple but not easy, and that's okay. Those are two different things. And courage is doing it even though you're afraid, or even though it hurts, or even though it's scary.
Yeah. You had mentioned earlier that there's an apophatic way of defining forgiveness, by what it's not. Do you mind sharing some of that?
I feel like there are certain things that, because the calcified ego, the ego that is so attached to ideas and systems and ideologies that aren't us, they want to trick us into thinking that forgiveness means this or that, so that we don't do it. So forgiveness is not letting someone off the hook. It's not like
it's not turning the other cheek to get slapped harder. What?
Right, exactly. It's not doing that. It's not like another thing is it's not condoning or accepting the action they did. Forgiveness does not change a wrong to a right. And that's one of the big ones. Is like, forgiving them doesn't mean that the wrongdoing is now a right. No amount of forgiveness can do that, because that's objective, right? It's objective what's wrong and right. So forgiveness is not complacency. It's not saying, okay, I forgive myself for eating 30 cheeseburgers at one day and like hurting my body. So it's like forgiving myself and taking that power back to say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to eat 15 cheeseburgers or whatever. You know what I mean?
It doesn't mean you're giving yourself permission forever to eat a million cheeseburgers. Yeah.
Right. Because just as in others, we have to recognize our things that are true wrongdoings and things that aren't for our good and our benefit. And, I'm going to do better tomorrow, and I'm not going to hate myself in the meantime. So it's not complacency. It's not being complacent in the things that we need to change and the things that we need to see others change. It's we're still able to do what's within our rights to improve the situation, improve whatever we need to forgive. Forgiveness doesn't require sorry. It doesn't require the offending party to even know they did something wrong or perceive that they were in the wrong. So that's another one. Those are a few of the things that the ego or the calcified ego. I don't want to put on display that that the ego is just something terrible and there's nothing of value there, but there are certain calcified or hardened aspects of our ego that keep us in suffering and keep us enslaved to itself. So
the shadow ego, or the untamed aspect of
right, the unintegrated ego, the part that wants us to continue to identify with bullshit. So those things, we'll try to, that aspect will try to trick us into thinking that I absolutely can't forgive them because that means that I endorse what they did. Well, that's not true.
Not what it means.
That's not
correct.
What yeah.
It's an important point because it really is. It's about our mental freedom and to be able to function at our optimal level and for us to work together to not be enslaved, really.
And I would say that's probably the main barrier, to forgiveness is saying like, no, what they did was wrong, so I can't forgive them. You know what I mean? That's like the main thing. And so, yeah, of course, what they did was wrong and you can forgive them. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be that way. It can be this way. I had a beautiful revelation in one of my workshops, I think last year or the year before, where someone was talking about someone that hurt them really bad. And they were like, not shouting, but raising their voice like they were laying on their back, just relaxed during the workshop. And they were kind of like shaking their hands at the heavens. And he said, why would I forgive you? You don't deserve my energy. And in that statement, he answered his own question. You forgive them because they don't deserve your energy. Because they don't deserve to take any more from you. Because that situation doesn't deserve you to continue to harvest your creative power. That's why you forgive. So it was a beautiful thing. And I said, dude, you just answered your own question. You know what I mean? You forgive them because they don't deserve to take any more from you. And you don't deserve to voluntarily give away any more of yourself to that situation or experience.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah. It's also, recognizing our value and our worthiness to have peace.
Yeah. That's and that when we're caught in the cycle of self-loathing, it's impossible. I mean, I wouldn't say it's nearly impossible. It's impossible to feel worthy of anything or to feel like the good things in your life you deserve. So that's why I talk about this state of being. Forgiveness isn't my second nature. I'm trying to make it my first nature every day, because if I'm not, then I'll believe the lie that I'm not worthy of this, this house that I've got, this family that I'm building, this community that I'm building, I'll believe those lies that I don't deserve to have the good things in life. And so that's why forgiveness is so important for me as a foundational principle in my life, and that does not mean, we've already hit on this, but it doesn't mean I don't experience anger. I experience anger on a daily basis. When I see transgressions or I see harm, I'm like, that's fucked. That's completely wrong. I'm pissed off about it. What can I do? If like someone does this harm to someone, I can't just go like murder them, but I can speak out against and raise awareness of the problem. And tell people that it's a lie, and tell people they can spit out the bread. They don't have to believe that, and so that's one of the things that's within my rights and capabilities of doing about it.
Are you talking about the bread that's in some kind of circus running a negative feedback loop, the carousel of chaos and all that shit?
Bread.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yep.
We were talking about this with Logan Hart. I don't know if you're familiar with him and Wizard Factory.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. He does his live show every Saturday, and he's mentioning the subject. And And yeah, forgiveness is really interesting to play into this. It wasn't, occurring to mind, while listening to that, but like as far as like, really dissolving these negative feedback loops, or even like shattering them, because people need to be weaned off them, or some can just do a cold turkey. It's a mixed bag with everyone. There's their templates for people to follow to exit out of the matrix, if you will, or
Yes,
in a
yes.
sense. But
Yeah, and it's so important because like to talk about what forgiveness is not, and to come to a holistic understanding of what forgiveness is. I call it the responsible practice of forgiveness, because it can very easily fall into a new age, misinterpretation and misuse of forgiveness, and you can very easily forgive yourself into becoming a dominator or worsening your slavery. So that's why I always, the workshops I do, and the things that I remind people of is not usually one or the other. It's both, like forgiveness and moral principles. Like
Yeah.
you don't understand if you don't start with forgiveness and then quickly bring forth natural law principles, you can easily slip into deeper bondage, or you can slip into a role of a dominator by forgiving yourself for true transgressions and not understanding
Yeah.
the corrective measures that need to be taken. I think
It,
that's so important to talk about.
yeah, it's not like we go into for like confession and confess our sins and then go out and just keep
Yeah,
perpetrating them.
exactly. And
yeah,
that's
and you're
like,
talking about don't hate the sinner, hate the sin, or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Tie
Hate
that
this
in real quick.
exactly. Hate the sin, not the sinner. So I can hate the. I don't necessarily consider myself as like hating anything. I try not to use that word and try not to develop hate, but it's the phrase
For
that
sure.
carries the potency. And it's like
Word.
don't squander your hatred uh, on one individual that does this one thing that millions of people around the earth do, but instead take up your sword against the idea. And
Yeah.
that's how you decrease it infecting the minds of millions, or that's how you help mitigate the spread of that mind virus.
You're
Right.
talking about the sword, those S words sharpened with an alchemical fire forged in that shit. So rise, like
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, buddy.
Exactly. Exactly.
So this reminds me of a lot of the parenting, class advice of when you're looking at a child who makes a mistake, a bad behavior, that, it's often taught like correct the behavior, focus on the behavior, not the child himself,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it's a similar kind of a thought, right?
Yeah. It's so important, and like I will have to say, parenting is where self forgiveness is the most absolutely vital and important thing you can do. The more resentment and hatred you're holding towards yourself, the more controlling and dominating you're going to try to be on your children. And I'm definitely guilty of this. I do a lot of teaching with my children, but I also, work to hold them to the highest standards. And sometimes that restricts their ability to creatively express themselves and be free, so that's something that's probably the thing that I work on and try to focus on the most is get out of the way. Let these kids grow up. Keep them from maiming themselves or disfiguring themselves. Don't let any serious harm befall them, but let them fall down. Let them play. Let them make a mess. And if they don't uphold their responsibilities after, talk to them about why they need to and the effect it has on the whole household and everybody else when they don't. Removing my self resentment and my anger towards myself for my imperfections, removing that as much as I can helps me, again, create that vibration of safety for me to tell
Yeah.
them something without them feeling like I'm attacking them or punishing them or coming down on them.
Right. And or holding their sins against them
Yeah,
forever,
yeah,
where they're getting a sense that something's maybe wrong with them or they're not good enough.
yes,
Right. So there's
right. Because they're kids, and they need to know that they are good enough, and like they're making mistakes, but they're also good enough. Them making mistakes doesn't mean they're not good enough. And the only time that I portray that feeling, or the only time that I cause that feeling or bring that vibration into a conversation is when I feel like I'm not good enough because of my mistakes.
Yeah.
And it really is it's so important to forgive the self when we're trying to
Right.
be conscious parents.
Right. What do you think about the relationship of guilt, to forgiveness?
Hand in hand, it's like that the same
Culpability.
with guilt. Yeah, it's like um uh, at the same time you're strengthening your ability to forgive yourself, you must be strengthening your ability to recognize objective transgressions and recognize true wrongdoings, and recognize things that might not be true wrongdoings, but they weren't the real you, and say, I forgive myself, and I'm able to forgive myself because I recognize this is wrong and I'm working on that, and I'm making sure that I don't do that anymore, or I decrease the risk of me doing that again. So it's like the guilt and shame plague us. They plague me, and I think everybody. And so that's why it can't. Sometimes if we can't forgive ourselves, we can, for certain instances, I say forgiveness is a foundation, and right on top, the first layer of the house above the foundation has to be moral principles, or the foundation has to be mixed of forgiveness and moral principles. They're both that important. But
Mhm.
oh no, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, the
Um,
No
idea of
worries, man.
guilt. And guilt, I was thinking of guilt
right.
is sort of like your compass around the moral principle, let's say,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
we've digressed, and so
Right.
then instead of just like beating yourself up in guilt and swimming in guilt, it's more of like a reminder to go through the alchemical process of forgiveness.
That's exactly. You just reminded me exactly what I was trying to get to. Is like, in certain instances, we shouldn't make it a habit of saying, "Well, I've got to be perfect in this regard before I forgive myself." But sometimes action comes before motivation, or sometimes saying, I've made these changes in my life and I'm not doing this harmful behavior anymore. So I guess I can forgive myself. That's acceptable, and some people who have a high degree of understanding in these topics and who have gone through a lot of evolution and alchemical process and shadow work on their own, that's a viable option, for healing and processing things. Just the most of my message and most of what I work with is to the common person who's not engaged or experienced or studied any of these types of things. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, man. I like that. And I'm gonna bring up an example, and I know it's whatever, but I mean, growing up, I was born in the '80s, subjected to a lot of television, and one
Right.
show that is kind of funny, but it brings up a good amount of moral messages. It was Family Matters, with like Steve Urkel and all that shit. And just to like run through just a type of alchemical process, they would, like have some kind of like misunderstanding or whatever. And like there's that moment of, deep self reflection and like feeling that culpability and like, oh man, it's like I got to talk to this person and apologize and this and that. And it's like, oh, that's like
Yeah.
good family vibes. And like that's like such a PG version of what we're talking about. But it's just
Sure.
interesting that, like people can knock television all they want, but there are some nuggets of some gold up in there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
does try to give people a navigational map to kind of like deal with people, even though it's like it's like the
That
writing
is
is on like a sixth grade level and this and that, but
We've forgotten those things. That's not in our on our screens most of the time.
right, right. And you won't find. I mean, I guess like there's a couple of shows like my kids watch or like that they're interested in, and there's a lot of times there's you do find nuggets of gold. There's some of them have like that whatever satanic overtone of like how to live life and how to view like the lackadaisical things in life and the worldview. But a lot of times there is a moral like nugget of gold in there, and a lot of those I haven't thought about that much. But yeah, there's less. There are a lot less shows and a lot less things on television these days that emphasize those. But yeah, you can find nuggets of gold, and I wonder like if there's like an overtone of like, of things that are probably not the right way to be, not the right worldview to have, and then the nuggets of gold, is that something like allowing and endorsing the whole worldview, but saying you can still reflect? Or that's I don't know. I'm about to go down a rabbit hole on that one. That's
Yeah. So let's sort of do a little summarization, I guess, Chad, of what you think are the most important takeaways on this topic you'd
Yeah.
like people to leave with.
Do you mind if I like ask a question real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I was definitely thinking down, it is past that hour and a half mark, but because you mentioned a couple things in some of your chats that I really like and are very intriguing that apply to this conversation, obviously. But like there's certain factors that people need to take into account that are kind of preventing one another to forgive one another. And I wanted to ask you, how can we properly forgive the person and not necessarily like the action that we feel so harmed by? And I feel like, yeah, sorry. And I got
no,
one
go
more.
ahead. No, go ahead. It's like, I mean, it's so much. It's just like that self-forgiveness and being able to clearly look at and objectively look at our past and what we've believed. And even if it's only one time in our life when we've admitted we were wrong and that we believed something that was false, or it's 100 times or 1,000 times, that's like such an important place to start, because that recognition of your susceptibility to believing lies carries over to your recognition of other people's susceptibility to believing lies and to clinging to dogma and false ideologies. So that's really important. And we can't clearly recognize those without compassion for ourselves, without having mercy on ourselves. So that's a huge barrier to us being able to forgive others, is not being able to forgive ourselves and view the bullshit we've believed as bullshit, and and accept that we were wrong.
Hell yeah. And that segues perfectly into my next question, and just highlighting on what you said beautifully in other podcasts. But it is, being able to balance that inner feminine and masculine, and having that compassion for self, and having that motherly entity that can care for oneself and kind of nurture and be like, hey, you were wrong. It's okay. We're still alive. We're still here for you. And
Right.
what you said in regards to like the the feminine masculine elevation through forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like, how can that help dissolve the divides between the sexes? In a sense, because we talked about this with Logan Hart a couple weeks ago as well.
Shoo, that's
I know.
that can be You got another 5 hours.
Yeah, buddy.
That line between the sexes is attacked so heavily right now. It's incredible.
Right.
Yeah. I think that the pinnacle of the enlightenment experience, or the journey towards higher wisdom, is elevating both the masculine and feminine. And when one, I always say, like, there's not toxic masculinity, there's just suppression of the feminine, which leads to domination, and then vice versa. It's not necessarily, true masculinity isn't truly masculine unless it's balanced by care and passivity and compassion and nurturing. It's hard to go in, like, it's hard to really dissect the whole line between the sexes and how to heal that. But it all, as within, so without. It all comes with raising the masculine and feminine within ourselves. And if you see my logo, I see it in the screen right here. We've got the chalice, and then we've got the mountain of the masculine, the blade emerging out of the chalice from the foundation of care, and the being supported by the feminine, and the action of the masculine thrusting upward and growing. And I think that practicing forgiveness requires that foundation of desire for compassion, desire for nurturing, the desire for mercy, and then finally committing the deed and offering the energy is the active masculine part of forgiveness. Having the ideas and the true care, the care to offer the forgiveness underneath of the feminine supporting the masculine. Otherwise, the mountain crumbles. So I think raising both of those within ourselves, both sexes, not just women saying, "I want to raise my femininity," when really they're really just becoming virilized and hyper masculine, and not understanding what, as a whole, not understanding what the true feminine is, and then vice versa with men. Saying, I want to raise my masculinity, and we turn into dominators. So I just think that both sexes engage the process of raising both the masculine and feminine, and the practice of forgiveness and the proper understanding of forgiveness is one way to do that. Not the only way, but one potent way of doing that. Then the divide will naturally heal. We'll reject the bullshit. We'll reject the things that divide us. But as within, so without. If we want to create order and healing and unity along that divide, we must create order and freedom and healing and unity within ourselves by raising both the masculine and feminine.
This sounds like a really good workshop, Chad.
Yeah, I know. I've talked. I think I had one workshop that the title mentioned balancing masculine and feminine energies through forgiveness, and I do try to hit on that as much as time allows in the workshops that I do, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be very powerful.
Definitely.
Sure. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, well said, Chad. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that was a good question.
But
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you all,
So
you all had some
Wesley, if you want.
fire questions. Yeah,
Putting you on the spot, man, but you're killing it. Appreciate it, brother.
Of course.
Yeah. So I guess in conclusion, right? I guess if you wanted to, any last things you wanted to state or declare, share, as far as under our framework of,
Yeah, and that's kind of like what Leslie was asking before. Yeah, of course. Don't ever believe the lie that you don't have the ability to forgive, that you're incapable of forgiving, because that's a lie. It's not true. And reflect on why you believe that, and you'll find that it's not true, and that you're able to do it. And sometimes, even if you don't feel it with your whole heart, offer forgiveness. Look in the mirror, say it out loud. I forgive myself for this. I forgive this person for that. Say it out loud. And then, even if you don't feel it or believe it with your whole being, you will feel and experience a weight lifted off yourself. And it's only the lies and deception and the programming that you have in your mind, that we all have in our mind, that you don't need to be ashamed of. You need to come to terms with and see it for what it is, and employ forgiveness in your life more tomorrow than you do today. If you haven't thought about it in years, spend 60 seconds tomorrow thinking about how forgiveness can help you and what relationships in your life will benefit from forgiveness. And you will produce your own freedom and liberate yourself higher and higher every step of the way, as you come to understand and develop and strengthen this quality within yourself. Then you'll have your freedom.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah.
I'm so happy to finally, chat with you like this.
Yeah, most
amazing.
definitely.
Awesome. You're great.
I appreciate you all so much for having me on, and I just what a fantastic barrage of questions, the amazing questions, and the amazing it was incredible. I was just send them to me. Every one was better than the next, and it was thanks for your childlike curiosity, or the ability to be curious and to objectively want to learn, and for allowing me to give you what I've kind of developed as a big part of my life, and a big gift that I'm trying to bring to people.
Yeah, an important one. I just want to emphasize, this is important work.
Thank you so much. I grapple with the self-doubt monster every day, and before every workshop, you'll find me pacing back and forth for about an hour or two, trying to convince myself these people actually want to hear what I have to say, and that's just a part of it. Before this, I was running around the house trying to distract myself and and get in my zone and prepare my sacred drink and everything like that. So, but yeah, I really appreciate that. It always helps to hear that someone finds value in the work that I'm doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
key.
totally. And if you want to share, we're obviously going to drop your links to, and you see the QR code for your
Oh
website as
yeah,
within.
yeah,
You
sure,
offer
right.
some really fantastic services,
Thank you.
and that's just like you just show improved right now of what a lot of
Yeah,
proper knowledge activated into proper wisdom
thank
in
you.
in this one beautiful gentleman. So yeah.
Yeah, certainly anyone's welcome to visit our website aswithin.org, as within Emancipation Project, Facebook, fucking Instagram, YouTube, all the social media places. We're still working on content, uploading more as we go, and if anyone wants to work one on one, they're having difficulty forgiving themselves, difficulty forgiving someone else, or difficult, or someone who could benefit from some added perspective or insight on anything that troubles them. You can always reach out, Chad at aswithin.org, or go to aswithin.org website. There's 100 ways to contact me on there. I do one-on-one stuff, or even local people. I'll come to your family cookout or family reunion and throw down a little discussion that's deeper than just the score to the baseball game yesterday. So we can do public events, private events, wedding officiating, all sorts of good stuff.
Wow,
Awesome.
that's awesome. What?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I wanted to ask this in the beginning, but
Sure.
can you give a brief caveat on like behind your cool name, like Shadical Hourgrave, man? That's like so cool. Like, because I've known you on Facebook for years, and like
Yeah.
we've been
Yeah.
like mutual friends from a distance and
Yeah.
all that stuff, and just like like-minded,
Right.
loving each other's work and all that stuff,
Sure.
So yeah, man.
It was just it's
I never asked
interesting.
you to.
I think about that. I reflect on that a lot, like how I chose that name. But I chose it when I was in pediatrics residency, and as I was developing my esoteric values and understanding, and my anarchist beliefs and opinions. I didn't want my patients were all children. I didn't want their parents or the hospital staff or my attending physicians necessarily to be able to search my name, Chad Hargrove, and see everything that I was posting, just because it with the programming, it can interfere with trust and things like that. So I have no idea. Shadical, because I didn't want people to be able to type in CHA, so I changed it to SHA. And then or Hargrove, HAR, I changed it to HOUR, and so it just came to me one day. And then Shadical rhymes with radical, and radical just means not in the center. It means away from the center. So and then the alchemical green language of hour and grave, like the clock is ticking. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's only a certain amount of time before I'm in that grave. So it's like that came to me way later, way after the fact that I made up that name. So your guess is as good as mine as to where that came from. But but it's just what came to me in the moment.
That's good. It's fun to say.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it.
All right. Well, we look forward to our paths crossing again in the future.
Yeah. We'll do a part 2 sometime whenever you all feel like it. I'm down.
All
Oh
right.
yeah, brother. Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank you
so much. Yeah, so
Yeah.
much love to you all. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Have a
Likewise,
wonderful
brother.
rest of your evening. I know it's late, a little later where you're at.
Yeah, we're right at midnight. It's good to go.
Yeah. Sleep well.
Yeah, man, yeah.
Yeah. You all have a great night, and we'll talk to you
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah,
Thanks.
likewise.
Bye.
Everyone out there listening, thank you so much. Sorry for I noticed a couple internet blips or whatever, but yeah, this is a constant work in progress, and we're doing this all for free and all this good stuff. But we're trying to make it as best as we can. It is part of that great work, because fostering that great work within ourselves and manifesting it out for folks to hopefully learn something and gain something from. So thank you once again if you made it this far. Much love and take care.